It's not been easy walking in two worlds. Western science has struggled to understand Indigenous thinking around matauranga Māori. For a very long time I heard the term, which was it's anecdotal information, and that was really quite dismissive in the way it was spoken on many occasions. And so a lot of our valuable matauranga from our tipuna has been lost in that transition of moving into Western science and Western technology.
Ramari Stewart is a Tohunga Tohorā, a whale expert.
So these orca scapula or shoulder blades, and they belong to an adult cow who is part of a family, and we've recovered the skeletons of the whole family.
For 60 years, Ramari has admired and studied whales using matauranga Māori or Indigenous wisdom.
It's really pushing.
And she's done it without a university degree.
People used to ask me, you were the university or something. I was constantly having to justify in those early years why I was doing what I was doing, sailing around with a bunch of dolphins, researching whales and or dolphins. That's the only time I ever contemplated doing it, was to get that off my back. I guess in hindsight I could have done with a PhD to advance the kaupapa sooner rather than later. It took perhaps a lot longer because I didn't have a PhD.
Ramari's first teachers were her father and kaumātua in the Mātātua rohe. She even had her first encounter with a whale when she was 10 while swimming her horse in the sea.
And suddenly, boof, up came a whale. Well, I forgot about the horse. Horse swam ashore and I found myself hanging on to a whale. But to be honest with you, I didn't think it was strange. I believed it was quite normal because I'd listened to so many stories about my Māori ancestors.
What inspired me was the fact that I very quickly learned that I was descended from whale riders and people who interacted with the sea and who voyaged on it, you know, in former times. And so I wanted to find that. I wanted to experience that world. And so I went out there looking for it.
At 22, Ramari went looking for humpback whales in the Pacific and Australia because of the stories her kaumātua had told. To fund her travels, she worked as a qualified intensive care nurse. But when she came home in 1978, Māori access to whales had suddenly been denied by the introduction of the Marine Mammals Protection Act.
And I thought, oh gosh, what am I going to do? I can't actually have anything to do with whales anymore, live or dead. And so MAF took over the portfolio, and the minister happened to live in Whakatane where I was, and so I went and knocked on his door and asked for a marine mammal research permit. There were no scientists on the water doing any marine mammal research at the time, so I was supervised by the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, but my real supervision was coming from elders. They were my mentors.
Along the way, she befriended many species, like these two torea on Okarito Beach. Ramari used her marine mammal research permit to travel the world, accumulating customary and modern scientific whale knowledge. From 1986, she spent 6 years sailing on foreign fishing vessels and was among the first observers to monitor their practices.
When I was out on the foreign fishing fleet, not only did I have a wonderful time with all of the marine birds and whales, but also the fish that they were catching. So I was finding new species or rare species, and I thrived on all of that because I had that kind of mind, that inquiring sort of a mind, and I very quickly recognised something that was unusual.
That inquisitive mind took Ramari to remote Campbell Island in sub-Antarctic New Zealand. In the early 1980s, Ramari worked there on a weather station. A decade later, she returned leading 2 pioneer expeditions to research the New Zealand southern right whales. Her experiences were filmed for the documentary A Whale Out My Window.
A remarkable woman. Ramari is a qualified intensive care nurse. She's built her own house and boat. She spent years collecting data on everything from large whales to the smallest insects. But what sets her apart is her unique affinity with the animals.
Researching the New Zealand right whale, that again was inspired by my father because they just weren't around anymore. But when I heard that there was some down there, I had to go down there somehow.
They're not very easy to count this morning, but I get the feeling there's easily 40 of them in the back of the bay.
Ramari's customary research on Campbell Island helped to understand the behaviours and whakapapa of whales, but her work also looked at the tikanga around recovering dead stranded whales. Ramari had a long history of contributing whale skeletons to the National Museum collections. She also led the first Māori customary response to a whale stranding in Kapiti in 1996, which created tensions.
There were 2 significant strandings in Kapiti. One was at Otaki, and then a year later, almost to the day, there were 3 at Paikakariki. And I happened to be up in Kapiti at the time, so that's how I came to get involved and got a karanga to go and put a team together to recover the jaw from the Otaki whale. We'd got support from Kahanunu to be able to sea clean it up there in their territory. However, the Department of Conservation jumped in and said, no, you can't take it out of one conservancy into another without, a whole lot of bureaucracy.
The incident sparked a protocol with the Department of Conservation around Māori access to whales under the Treaty of Waitangi. Ramari's customary and Western knowledge became more in demand from iwi, who wanted her to train their people and develop rapid response teams for strandings.
One thing that was kind of putting the practice at risk was occupational safety and health, because you're working with decomposing carcasses. You're working with a tūpāpaku. But a practice that had tapu values alongside nursing meant that I could take control of that and continue the practice and get people safely onto the beach and back to a marae without any problems.
But it's not just about recovering whale bones or oil. In 2014, Ramari was called to Ohiwahava in the Bay of Plenty after a whānau of 40 pilot whales stranded and died there. Ramari guided the local iwi of Te Upokorehe through the process.
We're just recovering the upoko and getting them to a safe place where we can bone them out.
2 years later, Ramari helped Te Upokorehe to open up a science lab on their marae. It helped them understand the whānau of 40 pilot whales that had died and broadened their indigenous knowledge and inquiry skills.
So what we're doing right now is collecting as much data as we can from these koiwi. That database can be used in the future for some leading edge research.
Back in Okarito, Ramari is co-working on a manuscript about Māori whale traditions with her nephew Bradford Harmy. She's agreed to accept her Order of Merit from the Queen because it acknowledges matauranga Māori and Indigenous whale research.
If we lose our practice, we can't actually perform as kaitiaki. So kaitiakitanga needs to be supported with an active practice. Otherwise we will never produce our future Tohunga Tohorā, our whale specialists.